Hi, my name is Dan Zeilinger, and I have been a world-traveling full-time trad jazz musician for the past 40 years. Some of my most memorable performances were on the lawn of the Edinburgh Castle, at Imperial Palace in Japan, as well as TV shows and commercials across the world. I've met many people during my career and have spent many hours on stage and off with these musicians, talking about jazz, life, and more. Some are touring musicians, some are theme park warriors, and some are casual musicians who play on the weekends with friends. I think they all have stories worthy of a movie script, and through these interviews, I'll be sharing them with you. So, hi there, this is Dan Zeilinger at Trad Jazz Today. My next guest is responsible for my life, basically.
Oh my God.
That a little bit later. And I think probably some of it he might have forgotten, or at least had in the recesses of his mind. But here he is, a trombone player extraordinaire, a world star. And he's just really just a little country boy from Costa Mesa, California. I guess Newport, Pasadena, actually, huh?
Right.
Mr. Dan Barrett. Hi, Dan.
Hey, Dan.
No, I'm going to surprise you here and tell you that I research everybody that I interview, even somebody I know as well as you, because I didn't want to step on anything during these interviews. Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, Howard was a wonderful interview. It was so nice to spend some time talking to him.
Sure.
Well, you know, it's when we were all traveling together, I don't think we all had that much of an amiable experience at times. Because I was a babe in the woods and you guys were bottle feeding me the whole time, but you know, what can I say?
Well, you made up for lost time.
One of the things I wanted to mention before we actually got into the bulk of your life story, which is what I basically do on these, by the way, is I just talk somebody through their life story, and not only just about the music in their lives, but just what's going on and what their big epiphanies were about music and such. But I want to first start off by saying, I remember, and I thank you a million times for taking your green Mustang and picking me up in Huntington Beach.
It was a copper tone Mustang.
Oh, okay. That's right. My sister had a green one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because I was trying to ride a 12-speed bicycle from Huntington Beach to Orange Coast College, you were nice enough on occasion, especially in the rain,
Sure.
to come down and pick me up, and Corey Kohler. Do you remember Debbie?
Yes.
She's actually made an appearance on Facebook and friended me about 2 months ago again.
Boy.
Yeah.
That comes under the blast from the past category.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, man.
So anyway, I want to thank you. Now, for those of you who haven't been watching all of my interviews, Dan Barrett was the reason I found classic jazz, actually. Brian Shaw was nice enough to pull me into practice rooms and play fake books with me and say, no, this is the melody, Dan. And then you kidnapped me into your living room at home and asked me if I knew the difference between Bix and Louie and Bobby Hackett and Jabo Smith, which I didn't.
Well, you do now.
Well, I do now, and you're the reason that I have a career. Although, it's kind of funny, I interviewed Mike Vax.
Oh, yeah.
And I told him it was actually his fault because he's the one who had us win the contest. And if we hadn't done that, I might have gone back to trumpet for the rest of my life. So.
Oh, but you probably tell everybody you interview that they're responsible for your career, right?
Nope. Actually, I do talk about you and Howard and the Brown Book and the changes you were so nice enough to write out for me.
Sure.
And then I also told Howard that it kind of screwed me up in some ways. Because I didn't learn Hello Dolly and Mame and all of those hits that the public likes to ask for.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got into real Dixieland casuals, I was going, I don't even know these songs. I don't know how Hello Dolly I didn't know how those things went because I learned, Meilenberg Joyce and Up a Lazy River and.
Well, you know what's funny is that's like me with the real book tunes. I mean, I know a good percentage of them, but what guys think of as jazz standards, sometimes I'll scuffle a little bit because I don't play those tunes, and the reason I don't play those tunes is everybody else plays those tunes.
Exactly, I understand.
You know?
Oh, I'm not really criticizing the idea, but I and you know this, and you may be surprised that I actually realized it. I was so spoiled coming into this style with those players. I didn't realize it because I went right from having Howard Alden playing in my ear to going to Brad Roth playing in my ear, and
Well,
I didn't know what real banjo players were like.
we should tell, or you should tell the listeners, the band to which you're referring, Dan.
Well, if you watch this channel, you already know actually. But when we were kids, um, and I mean that literally, Brian Shaw was at Golden West College, and the band director there received a flyer in the mail that said they were auditioning, or they're asking for college bands to enter a Southern Comfort contest, which was actually co-sponsored by National Association of Jazz Educators.
Right.
And
That band director was Dave Anthony.
Right, who's unfortunately now passed.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, about
Oh,
3 years ago, actually.
oh, gee.
I know. So we lost both Doc and Dave.
Yeah, yeah.
And
But yeah, and that was 1981. We entered that contest, Dan. Put the band together. Actually, Brian, I don't know if you know this story. Brian called me. We were college students. I was living with my mother and father in Costa Mesa, attending primarily Orange Coast College, but I was studying arranging with Tom Kubis at Golden West College, which made me eligible.
well, there were a bunch of us that weren't. I mean, I wasn't actually.
Right. Everybody had to sign up at Golden West to be eligible for the contest.
We signed up for all of Dave Anthony's classes.
Right.
And sort of did a wink and a nod, except for Bill Listen, of course.
Yes. Yeah, Bill was already there, I guess. And Brian called me one day. My mother answered the phone and said, "Oh, Danny, it's for you." And I'll never forget this. I answered the phone. I said, "Hello." And this voice said, "Dan, it's Brian Shaw." And the next thing out of his mouth was, "Now I'm going to tell you something, but don't hang up." Don't hang up on me. And I said, "Okay, I promise I won't hang up on you. What are you going to tell me?" And he said, "I want you to help me put together a band. We're going to enter a contest sponsored by Southern Comfort. And I think we can win the contest." And I didn't hang up on him. And I said, "Well, that sounds interesting."
That's not how my phone call went. Brian called me up and said, "Hey, Dan, how would you like to make $1,000?"
Okay.
And I went,
"Yeah, sure."
and so that was my phone call. But that was that was pretty interesting. Let's go through the personnel of that original audition group, which was Howard Alden.
Right.
Was in the audition group. I think it was Mark Curry, or no, it was Bob Reitmeyer originally, wasn't it? Or maybe it was Mark.
Oh, gee. I think it was Mark. I think it was Mark originally.
Yeah.
Forgive me if
Mark
I'm wrong.
on clarinet. And
Right.
then Bill Liston was playing tenor sax. And that was because he was other than Brian was in the recording arts program, Bill was
Right.
the only one actually in the music program at the
Right.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Ed Slauson, unfortunately, who's passed
Yeah.
also,
Right.
and was great drummer. And these guys are the people who bottle fed me through my Dixieland beginnings, because I was a high note Latin jazz player and big band lead player when Dan met me. Not
So
a
we
very
had-
good one either, but
We had four horns, Brian Shaw on trumpet. I played trombone, Bill Liston on tenor, and I guess it was Mark Curry on clarinet. And then Ed Slauson on drums, Howard Alden on tenor banjo, and he played some guitar, acoustic
Right.
guitar. And you were making your debut on
I was making my debut
jazz
on
tuba.
tuba.
Right.
As a jazz tuba player. I was playing tuba at the college, and I played a little bit in my senior year of high school. But
Okay.
I'm not even sure how I got thrown into that mix, other than Brian liked me as a person, I guess. But
Well, and I remember we made a reel-to-reel tape recording for submission. We had to record 4 songs, and I wrote some hasty arrangements of 4 traditional jazz favorites, and we sent it away. And I really didn't think anything would come of it. And then lo and behold, we got selected for the finals, which
Yep.
surprised all of us. So we were flown back to St. Louis for
oh
the
God,
big.
yes. Our
big
judges were Matt Benton and Mike Vax And Tommy Newsom.
Tommy Newsom, right, whom I got to play with years later at jazz parties around the country. And Tommy and
Nice
I got to
guy.
know each other pretty well. So I got to share the stage with him actually many times at different jazz parties.
Just a wonderful person. He spent some time with me in St. Louis talking about marching bands because
Hmm.
he had written quite a few of those in his high school and college days,
Oh, okay.
and he was so welcoming and accessible
Yeah.
for somebody
Yeah.
who's basically a superstar on the Tonight Show, and nice guy. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's back up though.
Sure.
Let's
Okay.
talk about your beginnings in this style and how that Orange County era of gold with all of these players. I mean, I still play with Jeff Beaumont to this day, by the way,
Oh, God bless him. Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
still play with Robbie a lot.
Okay. Robbie Rhodes,
Yeah.
piano player, right? Uh-huh.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And so a lot of those guys. But tell me about the beginning there and how you. I know. I'm sorry. I know that you guys used to stand at the foot of the South Frisco band at the pizza parlor there
Well,
and
okay.
watch them.
I began the trombone in fifth grade with Ken Owen, who taught at Heinz Kaiser Junior High School
There we go.
in Costa Mesa. And at that time, when music programs existed, um, he taught beginning band at several elementary schools, satellite elementary schools, which would eventually feed into his junior high school. So he was preparing students for his music program at the high school or at the junior high, which included seventh and eighth grade. So I was in fifth grade. He showed up at our social studies class. I remember the day, really. And I remember Mrs. Wasser, our social studies teacher, and she interrupted herself and she said, "Oh, class, we have a very special man. Mr. Owen from Heinz Kaiser Junior High School is here. He's the music director. And he'd like to talk to you about music and his music program. So here's Mr. Owen." And we all gave him a hand. And it's really weird, Dan. I've forgotten so much, over the course of my life. But I remember that speech he made pretty clearly. And I remember his cardigan sweater. And he had kind of a nasal voice. And he stood up in front of the class and he talked about how music is a part of our daily lives. And if you go to a supermarket, you can hear music overhead on the speakers. And he said, you hear music all the time on television shows. And he made a point. He said, and this dates the speech. He said, many of you have your favorite radio stations, and your favorite songs that you like to listen to. And then he went on to say, now he said, it's one thing to enjoy music, but he said, maybe some of you have given some thought to what it might be like to make music for other people to enjoy. And I just remember a switch went off in my fifth grade brain. And he said that he would show up next week and those of us that we should go home and talk to our mothers and fathers and have 3 instruments in mind that we might want to play. And he made a point that he didn't teach guitar, and a bunch of the kids groaned, because rock was the pop music on the radio. He didn't teach guitar, and he mentioned a couple of other instruments that he didn't teach. But anyway, to get to the point, a week later, about a dozen of us were led down to the multi-purpose room, and he had several real musical instruments set out on the tables, and he had color photographs on like little standing, there were photos, but they stood up so they were clearly visible on the tables. He had photos of French horns and oboes and things that he didn't want to bring from the junior high. And I remember like 6 of the boys jumped over by the trumpet, and I was one of them. And a couple of the kids went over by the drums, and a couple of the little girls went over by the flutes. It was what you would think of in 5th grade. And he talked to all of us who wanted to play trumpet. Nobody was over by the trombone. He had a trombone on a table, but no one was sitting over there. So he finally got to me and he said, "Why do you want to play the trumpet?" And I said, "Well, the trumpet always gets to play the melody. And I like the melody, and I want to play the melodies." And he said, well, you can play melodies on trombone, but he said, let me see your teeth and your jaw. And he looked at me and he said, well, with the little overbite you have and the way your jaw is constructed, you'd probably be a better trombone player.
A typical band director ploy, by the way.
Exactly. And I said, well, that was my second choice. I selected trumpet and trombone, and I thought if I couldn't get those two, the tenor saxophone might be fun. So he got me started on the trombone. And I'll jump ahead. Years later, I was at his house after I'd become a professional musician, and we were talking. And it was actually toward the end of his life. And he very sheepishly, he confessed just what you said. He said, Danny, do you remember when I told you about your jaw and your overbite? And I said, well, I'm surprised that you remember that. I do remember it. And he said, I just needed trombone players in the band. I had all the trumpet players I could use. So you're right on the money, Dan. That was a band director ploy. And he was happy when I told him. I said, I think things worked out real well, and I wouldn't change anything.
It's kind of funny. I've actually talked a little bit out of school about you in some of my other interviews, and one of which the fact that when I met you, you were still on occasion dabbling with your tenor sax. And of course, everybody's shocked when I say that. I said, I know he plays great cornet and good trombone, but what you don't know, and they go, really? I said, yeah, he was playing with the tenor sax a little bit when I met him.
Very little. Well, with us staying at home these days, I do have I have a very nice tenor in a case. I'm looking at it across the room. Thanks for reminding me. I should get it out.
I too have a tenor sax, but I haven't spent any time with it.
We're two of many owners around the world of tenor saxophones.
Well, as you know, when we met, I was playing almost a little bit of everything.
Yeah, sure.
Because nobody ever told me otherwise. When I was in high school, the band director used me to fill up whatever he needed, like the band director ploy.
Right.
Dan, I need a French orchestra. Dan, I need a trap set drummer and jazz band. Dan, I need, and I went, oh, okay, And I got to OCC, and Doc says, you play what? Anyway, Nobody ever told me otherwise.
And it sure is handy when you're a band director, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know how to tell clarinet players not to, how to play over the break, and I know all the positions. And I played trombone for a while with a Latin band, and what can I say?
Yeah,
but
very good. Well, you asked me about how I got interested in jazz. So now, from starting trombone at 11 years old, I was then in 7th grade. I was about 12 or 13, and I remember it was the summer between 8th grade and that September I would begin my freshman year at Newport Harbor High School. And I liked Mr. Owen, and he had a summer band program. So I had just graduated from Heinz Kaiser, but I went back in the summer, and I kind of helped him like an informal teacher's assistant. And I would sit with the trombones and show the 7th grade trombone players, because I was a graduated 8th grader, so I was a veteran. But I would show, and I was I've been practicing a lot, so I guess I was advanced for my age.
More importantly, you could get to 7th position.
That's true. That's right. So I would help the trombone players and help Mr. Owen with the library and stuff. And I remember this also. This one day, a fella came in looking pretty preppy in a white turtleneck and blonde hair, like stereotypical Newport Beach kid. And I have many friends in Newport Beach. Let's make this clear with our local audience. But what can you say? He didn't look like he came from Costa Mesa. He looked like he came from Newport Beach.
Yes.
Do we get the distinction here? But he played ragtime piano. And Mr. Owen introduced him. And Mr. Owen, just making conversation, he said, "Do you have any plans for the weekend?" He said, "Oh, I'm going to go hear a guy named Robbie Rhodes. He plays with the South Frisco Jazz Band over in Huntington Beach." And I said, "What's this all about?" And he said, "Oh, hi, kid." He was like a sophomore in high school. So now he was the veteran, who knew everything. And he said, "Yeah," he said, "the South Frisco Jazz Band. It's a real hot traditional jazz band." And I said, "Oh, you mean like Dixieland?" And he said, "Hey, we don't use that word anymore. That means commercial music and, straw hats and striped shirts. And no. This is authentic New Orleans and Chicago style jazz." And I said, "Well, how big's the band?" And then he rattled off, well, they have cornet, clarinet, trombone, tuba, piano. The leader plays banjo, and they even have a washboard player. And I said, what? That's 7 guys. He said, yeah, they're there every Friday and Saturday night. And the place is called the Pizza Palace. I live about 6 minutes from there at the corner of Brookhurst and Adams in Huntington Beach. So he got permission from my parents to take me over. I didn't have a driver's license. I was 14, I think, or something. And, you know, you have Danny back by midnight, that kind of thing. So we went over to the Pizza Palace, and all I can say is it changed my life. I walked in, and the band was playing some jazz classic. Could have been Dipper Mouth Blues or Clarinet Marmalade. I don't know what they were playing, one of the old tunes. And it was loud, and it was exciting, and it caught me. And I remember thinking, that's what I want to do. I want to do that. Whatever it is they're doing, I want to do that.
Yep.
So,
like I said, I still play with Robbie, and I've interviewed Dan Comans, and so a lot of those guys actually relay the story of seeing you guys down at the Hal. I interviewed Hal Smith, and he was saying,
right.
yeah, we were all standing at the foot of the stage just with our mouths agape.
Right.
You know.
Well, but Brian Shaw and I, that was our Friday and Saturday night hangout. And several of our friends from Harbor High would go over, and we'd spend our Friday and Saturday nights there. And eventually, I got to sit in with the band, and I subbed for Frank DeMond, their trombone player. And the guys in the band, they were all uniformly nice and generous in their time. They'd spend their breaks with us and talk to us about chord changes and about the source recordings for the tunes, where they learned the tunes. And so little by little, you know, we kept listening and learning, and our record collections kept growing, and we just got wrapped up in it. And it was fun for us at that age too, because everybody on campus, they were listening. I remember Creedence Clearwater Revival had just gotten popular. So that was the big group to listen to. But of course, the Beatles were still popular, not touring anymore, but on records. All kinds of rock bands. Blood, Sweat, and Tears had just come out.
Yeah, they had horns, so they were more fun to listen to.
Yeah.
In Chicago.
Well, that's the other thing, you know. In order to hear a trombone being played outside of the South Frisco Jazz Band, before the advent of Blood, Sweat, and Tears in Chicago and the bands that had horn sections, the only way to hear a trombone being played is to go back a few years. And,
or watch Bob Havens with the Walk Orchestra.
Right. Yeah. Well, but see, I didn't know about that, you know. But I remember Mr. Owen, going back to junior high, he caught me in a practice room with a trumpet once, and he said, "Why do you want to play trumpet? You know, you're already making progress on the trombone." And I told him what I told him when I first started out. I said, well, the trumpets, they always get to play the melody. And I'm tired of playing the supporting role of the trombone. I want to play the melody. And he's the one, he said, well, Danny, the trombone can sound beautiful playing the melody. And I said, well, I've never heard that. So I agreed to meet him the next morning. My parents got me ready a half hour early. And bless Mr. Owen, he showed up early himself with a 78 RPM record of Tommy Dorsey playing I'm Getting Sentimental Over You. And I remember he pulled over the big industrial strength record player that every band room had in those days, you know, the like granite particle board.
Yes.
And they weighed a ton. I mean, you could put them on the other side of a seesaw opposite a 1950 Buick. You know, they balance each other out. This enormous platter turntable. And he put on the 78, and I heard this beautiful sound, this beautiful, gorgeous tone. And I listened, and I'm watching the arm go across the grooves of the 78, and this beautiful sound, you know, from the record player. And then there was a saxophone section. They played a little bit. Then there was a piano solo. And then this beautiful sound came back in, and it was getting toward the end of the record. And I looked up at Mr. Owen, and I said, well, Mr. Owen, when does the trombone player start playing? And he laughed, and he said, Danny, that's Tommy Dorsey. He's been playing since the beginning of the record. He played all the way through, except for those little passages by the saxes and the piano. That's Tommy Dorsey playing the trombone. And I shook my head and I said, no, it isn't. That's not a trombone. And he laughed some more. He said, yeah, that's Tommy Dorsey playing the trombone. And I said, a trombone can't sound like that, you know? And I remember him telling me, he said, well, look, he said, if you really practice, you know, you might be able to sound like that someday. And that has never happened. But that was my introduction to Tommy Dorsey and, you know, what a trombone could actually sound like.
Well, that's because you don't play a small enough bore.
Oh, maybe that's it.
Just kidding, obviously. Yeah, you've made a really, and it may sound silly coming from me, but I'm really proud of the star you've become, and the fact that you've gained such a reputation as a cornetist. I would say, you know, close to equal to your trombone playing, and that's an accomplishment.
Well, thank you. It's again, that was the instrument I really first wanted to play for the reason I described, you know, but I guess I haven't concentrated on it as much as I have trombone, but I do love the instrument. It's funny, when I go to Europe, I play a lot more cornet. Actually, I have a trumpet over there that I play. And I play it a lot more over there. And in fact, am billed on either one or the other, or sometimes both. I hardly get called to play it here, but over in Europe, they think of me as a trumpet player as much as a trombone player.
Speaking of Europe, Tomasz Istas says hello.
Who's that?
The Bow and Ragtime band. Tomas?
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I didn't. Yes, Tomas. Yes, of course.
Yeah, I actually toured at his festival when I was with 10th Avenue, and I've interviewed him already. And I saw on his resume that he knew both you and Andy.
He's a terrific guy and a very good musician, of course.
Oh, very. Yeah. You should try and catch the interview I did with him, because he talks about what he learned from jazz and how it applies to classical and vice versa. A really neat conversation.
Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive as many people think they are, you know. Look at Brian Shaw. How about Brian Shaw?
Oh, well. I can't say enough about Brian, except for the fact that when I met him, he was barely reading.
I'll be darned.
Well, you know, he told me you knew he was taking lessons with
there was John Kleiman and Pappy Mitchell.
Pappy Mitchell is the one who actually got on him about not reading well. He told me he made it all the way through Newport Harbor, basically listening to the march once and then having it memorized instantly.
Well, when you have an ear like that, you can get away with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. He's phenomenal. But when he and I first started, when I met all you guys at Orange Coast College, that was one of his confessions to me. Of course, the other one was that he couldn't stand sitting next to me in a big band because my tone was so acerbic. So
acerbic. Well, now I have one for you about Brian's reading. We were in high school. We were in a ragtime band. You mentioned Jeff Beaumont earlier. Yes. Jeff led the band, and he actually went to I found out it was a rather well-known auction. People in the movie industry still talk about the auction that MGM Studios had in, I think it was 1970 or 71. They had a big, like a clearinghouse auction. They were selling props and costumes and all kinds of things. And Jeff bought a lot of, I don't mean a lot as in many, I mean a lot.
Right. A lot of stuff, yes.
Group, yeah, of red marching band uniforms that were used in the movie The Music Man.
Okay.
How about that, from 1955? And they had just been languishing in some warehouse, and MGM decided to get rid of them. So Jeff bought, I don't know, 15, 20 of these uniforms in various sizes. And they hadn't been worn that much just during the making of the movie, and then put on hangers somewhere, you know. Yeah. So we had these terrific looking uniforms, and Jeff somewhere found a full library of ragtime arrangements from, I'll say, circa 1895, 1900 to about 1915. And they were the little marching band size, I don't know what, 5 by...
Right, the flip folder size.
Yeah, flip folder size arrangements. Well, getting back to Brian Shaw, there were a couple of arrangements written for cornet in A.
Right.
And if those listeners or people seeing this interview, if you've ever seen music of that era, and especially these ragtime charts, they're usually written in 2/4 with a lot of 16th notes. They're not easy to read,
No.
especially for a high school kid. And Jeff said, "Oh, Brian, this one's for cornet in A. I guess we can't play it." And Brian said, "Well, let me try it. My teacher and I have been working on transposing." And Brian Shaw would sit and sight read, you know, he'd have to transpose it, up a half step or
Right.
down a half, yeah, because he had a B flat cornet, and he's making this half step transposition. He was about 17 years old, so
Yeah.
he may not have been reading shortly before shortly before that, but
Right.
man, he'd really been working on it.
Yeah. Well, he was. I think at the time he was just started or had been taking lessons from Pappy for a little bit.
Okay.
It's oh, what did I lose? I just lost the Beaumont. Somebody else had brought up Jeff. Howard talked about Jeff, and of course, like I said, I play with Jeff on every so often. He comes out from Nevada, and he'll sit in with my Friday Curly's band that you were so nice enough to come down and check out.
Sure.
Oh, he was there that night. That's right. And somebody was asking me if he still owned his brush car, and I said I don't know. Here's a question for you. Do you remember, because you were there, my very first time trying to play Dixieland?
I can't say I remember that specifically,
Okay.
Dan. I just remember the early
South
days.
Coast Village.
Oh, wow. Oh, okay. With
I had
Larry
brought my
Wright.
girlfriend, I forget who she was
Yeah.
at the time, and we were sitting on the lawn. And I don't remember who was supposed to be playing bass or tuba, but they didn't show up. It might have been Steve Resnick or somebody.
No.
Uh,
Oh,
but
no,
anyway,
I don't.
you
Okay.
were Brian looked down at me, said, "Dan, go back to school and get a tuba." And of course,
Huh.
I'd never done anything. Tom Kupas was on the gig. He was playing
Wow.
reeds,
He was subbing then,
and
I
I think
guess.
Larry was playing banjo, maybe.
That could be. Usually Paul Woltz Steve Resnick played banjo.
Oh, okay.
Maybe Paul Woltz played tuba or sousaphone.
I just know I ended up going to get my horn and coming back, and I couldn't find anything with both hands. And I think when I got back, the first tune you called when I got back was Sweet Georgia Brown.
Oh, okay.
And I'd never played 12-bar blues, let alone trying to fake Sweet Georgia Brown. And you guys were very kind.
I'm glad to hear that. Okay.
But that was my first exposure to.
That was a nice little gig, South Coast Village.
It was a nice venue.
That's where I met Howard Alden.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was subbing for Steve Resnick on tenor banjo. And I'd
Okay.
never heard anybody play the banjo like that in my life. It was really, amazing.
Oh, you're phenomenal. In fact, on his interview, I was telling him that the four-string community really appreciates the fact that he never abandoned banjo completely. And
No.
He just giggled at me. He said, "Yeah, I understand what you're saying." But so yeah, it was nice. Talk to me a little bit about, because you've talked to me once about it, but I think it'd be fun for the audience to hear your experience with Benny Goodman.
Wow. Okay.
Or
Well,
let's start with how you got to New York and how that happened.
again, Howard Alden's responsible for that. We had a gig at the Ancient Mariner on the Coast Highway in Newport Beach, a Sunday brunch gig. Lasted quite a while, actually. Brian Shaw on trumpet, Howard on guitar. A terrific man, long gone now, Bill Hadnot, old-fashioned bass player from Kansas City. He'd make the trip from Inglewood all the way down to play with us in Newport Beach, and me on trombone. So we had trumpet, trombone, Howard on electric guitar, and Bill on bass. And we developed a following on these Sunday afternoons, and it was a nice little gig. And one day Howard said, hey Dan, in about 3 weeks, you're going to have to find a sub for me because I'm going back east. I'm going to play the summer with Red Norvo's trio in Atlantic City. And I said, wow, congratulations. So Howard did that. He came, and they would play 6 nights a week at some casino in Atlantic City when such gigs existed for jazz groups. And the Monday nights were dark, so Howard would take the train from Atlantic City up to New York City, and he already had friends there and contacts. And he spent Monday nights just sitting and jamming at every club he could find on different Monday nights. And he came back to the Ancient Mariner and he said, Dan, I'm going to move to New York City. It's the place to be if you want to play jazz and swinging jazz like we like. You can make a living there. And I said, oh, wow, that's a nice pipe dream to have. And he said, no, I'm really going to do it. I said, okay, Howard, whatever you say. About 2 weeks later, he called and he said, hey, Dan, this is Howard. I said, oh, where are you? He said, oh, I moved. I'm in my new apartment. Well, I'm thinking he moved across town in Hollywood, you know. And I said, oh, where are you located? And he said, it's on 2nd Avenue around 78th Street, between 77th and 78th. And I said, where is that? I don't know any area like that in Hollywood. He said, no. He said, I'm in Manhattan. I'm in my new apartment. I said, Manhattan? What are you talking about? And all he said, well, I told you I was going to move. And I said, yeah, but Howard, that was like a week and a half ago. He said, well, I moved. And I said, what did you do with your Dodge Dart? He said, I sold it. Well, what did you do with your furniture? He said, I sold it and gave it away. And, you know. So then in subsequent phone calls and conversations, he said, look, Dan, if you really want to play this music that you love, you should come to New York and stay with me for a while till you get your own place. So Howard moved in 1982. I moved on February the 1st, 1983. I flew to New York with a trombone and a case of some 78s and LPs. And I had a suitcase of clothes checked in the luggage. And I was already seeing Brian Shaw's sister, Laura, at the time. And I said, look, I don't know how long I'm going to stay back there, but, you know, I'll send for you if it looks like I'm going to stay. I didn't know if I'd be there 2 weeks and come running back to California, but it looked like I was going to stay. So Laura flew out. We got married at a church on Park Avenue in Manhattan.
I always wondered how come I didn't get called for the wedding, but no, I am.
Yeah,
no, I'm
sorry about that.
No, I'm kidding. I'm just saying.
Howard Alden and I formed a quintet, the Howard Alden Dan Barrett Quintet. Made some recordings, traveled to Europe for festivals, stayed busy for a few years. And there was so much going on at that time. From 1983, I was there almost 14 years until 1996. And many of the swing era generation of players, black and white, were still extant and still active in New York. So I got to meet and actually was on one concert with Roy Eldridge. Scott Hamilton was coming into prominence. Ruby Braff, the legendary cornet player, he was on the scene. Clark Terry would show up, Kenny DeVerne. Our hangout was Eddie Condon's in Manhattan, which was a musician-friendly place, owned and managed by Ed Pulser, who's in his 80s now and still playing great. So Condon's closed in August of 1985, and only because their lease ran out and the landlord tripled the rent. And the Condon's was running successfully, but they couldn't manage. I think they were paying a little over $7,000 a month in those days for rent, and the manager tripled it to like 22,000. Those are the figures I remember. And they couldn't do that. It was a jazz club, you know. So the last night of Condon's was, I'll never forget it. The place was packed. It was a sweltering August night. It was like I just went in a shower with my whole suit and tie on. I was just drenched. Everybody was. And I went outside to get some air, and this big checker taxi cab pulled up, and a very tall man in a dark suit got out. He had black horn-rimmed glasses, and the murmurs started by the people waiting out on the sidewalk. And, hey, that's Benny Goodman. Hey, look, hey, it's the King of Swing, you know. And I remember this, they call him the king of swing. And just like peasants in villages would part for the king, this throng assembled in front of Eddie Condon's, they just automatically parted and gave Goodman an aisle. And the guy ran up to the door and opened the door, and Benny politely thanked him. And I thought, wow, that's Benny Goodman. Gee, I knew he lived here. But see, I'd been in New York about a year and a half or something like that, 2 years. I hadn't seen him. And I'll be darned, that's Benny Goodman. And then I started panicking because I thought, oh my God, I got to go back in there and play for him. I'd been hired to play the last set. I didn't get to that. Tom Artin, the house trombone player, couldn't make it for the closing night. I was very sorry about that. I was glad for the opportunity, but I was sorry Tom couldn't play the closing night. He was still is a good trombone, a great trombonist in New York, brilliant man. And he had to go to England for some research on, I think he was a professor of English literature or something. Anyway, I'm digressing, but Goodman was in the audience, heard me play. I didn't try to impress him. I just thought, I'll just play the best I can. He was sitting right in front of the stage. And a few months later, he called personally to ask if I would be interested in making a rehearsal for a new big band that he was putting together. So that's how that happened. That was in late 85, and I stayed with him until his death in June of 86. So the last 7 months or so of his life, I got to play with the band. That was very exciting.
Yeah.
Despite stories that are out there, he was very gracious and patient with us. Randy Sankey, the great trumpet player, we were talking, and he said, Benny paid us for those rehearsals. We got a little bit of money for each rehearsal. He said we should have paid him, for what he taught us. And I heartily agree. We all agree. Ken Poplawski was in the band. The late Chuck Wilson played beautiful lead alto. Laurie Frink played lead trumpet. Laurie was a great trumpet player. Studied with Carmine Caruso, and great lead chops. John Eckert was the third trumpet player. And Benny used various trombone players while I was there. He was always using different trombone players, but the guy we settled on was Matt Finders, who played for several years on The Tonight Show.
Interestingly enough, this is going to really fry your bacon, but Matt actually used to sub for me out at Knott's Berry Farm.
I believe it.
On tuba.
Yeah, right. He had a tragic accident. I guess it wrecked his chops for trombone, but I heard he was playing tuba. I should get in touch with him. I just haven't done that. But he's a marvelous guy and a marvelous player. So, yeah, my 7 months with Benny Goodman were very exciting and very educational.
Yeah, that's, I have to admit that your recollection is a little bit contrary to what I heard about that band, but we don't need to get into that. It's just, I guess there have been some rumors about that whole incident that maybe were erroneous. Talk to me a little bit about your trip with Woody.
Well, now I'm curious what you heard, or what
I heard that it was actually an established big band that he basically fired the leader on and took over.
That's pretty much true.
Okay. Okay. So, okay, I'm glad we cleared that up, because I didn't.
Yeah, he made a few other changes, but he seemed to like, for instance, he liked Chuck Wilson's lead alto playing. He liked Randy Sankey's trumpet playing.
Oh yeah, I'm not trying to poo-poo anything. I was just wanting to make sure that I'm not spouting wrong stories either, of course.
Right.
Yeah. So then I saw the Woody special on his trip to Russia, and Howard talked to me a little bit of what it was like to work with Woody. But what was your experience like?
No, we're talking about Woody Allen. That wasn't Russia. I didn't go to Russia with him.
Okay, well, he had put out a documentary on the Europe trip, I guess.
Yeah, we went to Europe. I don't know, Russia wasn't on the list.
Okay.
But I was told later we played 29 cities in 33 days.
Yikes.
So if that gives you an idea of how we were running around, Yeah, we played some of the biggest concert halls. It was like playing with the Beatles. We got to France, and we could barely hear the band. We started playing, and the audience started chanting, "Woody, Woody,
Now, who
Woody."
was on the band?
It was a very good band for the style. Woody wanted a primitive New Orleans style band, and we had Simon Wettenhall on trumpet. I can't say enough good about him musically and personally. He's a terrific guy, originally from Australia. Um, I believe he studied with Warren Marsh,
Okay.
the tenor sax player who was here in LA for years.
As
who's
Brian did
associated-
actually for a little bit.
I'm sorry, who did?
Brian Shaw did for a little bit.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And Warren, of course, was associated with Lenny Tristano and much more modern jazz. And Simon is conversant in that style as well. He just loves music. He loves the whole spectrum of music.
Yeah.
But he played great lead trumpet in that early New Orleans style. Woody, of course, on clarinet. I played trombone. We had Cynthia Sayer, who's known as a banjo player. She was playing piano in the
Okay.
band. And Greg Cohen, who is now teaching or maybe just retired, teaching a jazz class in Berlin at a university in Berlin. Greg Cohen, who'd worked with Lou Reed and some other
Was
thing.
Was Eddie Davis on that?
Well, I'm getting to him.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
we
sorry.
had-
Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. John Gill on drums. John is like yourself. He's a multi-instrumentalist. He played banjo for years with Turk Murphy. And toward the end of Turk's life, John moved over to the clarinet. He was playing clarinet. But he played great New Orleans style drums. Oh, he's also a very good trombone player
Wow.
in the Turk style. So John Gill on drums, another terrific guy. I loved hanging out with him. And I was getting to Eddie Davis, who sadly passed away
Right.
just a couple months ago in New York City. He was the banjo player and really the leader of the band.
Okay.
So Woody would tell Woody would tell Eddie the tunes that he'd like to play, and Eddie would get the band together, and we'd go over these rather arcane New Orleans tunes that Woody gravitated toward. So that was an exciting tour, and I got to see. Well, we went to Venice. We played La Scala. We got a private tour of the Sistine Chapel. It was amazing. You know, it was a really exciting tour.
Which kind of reminds me, I told you that right before I came online with you, I was interviewing Corey Jim.
Right.
And he and I were talking about how awful it is that quite often these jazz festivals hire rock and roll sound guys.
Oh, yeah.
And he says, yeah, he goes, I don't know anybody who plays our style who really likes that loud rock and roll sound guy thing or sound guys in general, except for Dan Barrett. And I went, what? He goes, no, I'm kidding. I said, I'm going to tell him you said that.
Well, it's funny. A new friend of mine, new that is in the last few years, is a tenor saxophonist in Spain named Enrique Pedro. And Enrique brought me over in 2018 for my first tour as a guest with his band. And at our first concert, we were in a fairly small wooden theater. It had a balcony. I would say it seated 300 people. Very small venue. And it was built probably in the late teens or early 20s. Large wooden stage, full grand piano. Again, I'll mention the balcony because the audience was fairly close to us. And Enrique, who insisted on calling me Mr. Barrett for the first couple of weeks, I finally got him to, call me Dan. At this first concert, we were at the sound check, and the sound men were just beginning to set up. It looked like the Grateful Dead was going to be there that night. And Enrique said, well, Mr. Barrett, what would you do with regard to the sound here in this venue? And I remember I said, well, Enrique, I said, look, I'm your guest, and you obviously know how your band sets up with regard to sound. I'm just going to try and fit in. You should set up the way you set up. And he said, no, he said, I really want to learn. I'd like to learn from you and learn how you would do this in this situation. And I said, okay, I'll tell you. I would play entirely acoustically. And he looked at me, and the other guys looked at me, and I said, now, if you want one microphone in front for announcements, I said, you could have that. But I said, even that you don't need. If either of us makes announcements, we can step to the front of the stage and project our voice. They'll hear us just fine, even in the furthest seat in the house. And then I told Richard, an English piano player that Enrique brings over from London, I said, look, Richard, I'm not trying to beat up your hands. I said, if you're used to amplification, by all means, have a microphone or something. I said, I'm really not trying to take over the band, but Enrique asked me what I thought. And Richard said, no, I was listening. I said, he said, it's a full grand piano, and pianists play concerts with no amplification. He said, if we can get the bass and drums to keep it down, he said, I think it might sound nice. So in short, we played that concert acoustically. We got several standing ovations. The people loved it. I guess there was mention made in the newspapers. And Enrique said it was the first time in his life that he had played acoustically at a performance. And I said, what? You've never played without amplification? He said, never. It just isn't done here. And the nice coda to that story is we played acoustically for the rest of that tour. And I went over last year, we played acoustically. I played 4 gigs before I had to run home at the beginning of the pandemic, which we don't need
No,
to
it's okay.
But we played all these concerts acoustically. The audience loved it. Of course, we did play a couple of large festivals, outdoor events where we had very large audiences, and we did use amplification for that. But in jazz clubs and auditoriums, we played acoustically.
Yeah, I tell, in general, I'll tell people that if they ask me how I want things mic'd, I go just like just like Louis Armstrong mic'd it.
That's a good answer. Right. That's a good answer. And I'm not trying to put sound men out of business, but for our kind of music, it not only is it not necessary, it's really not welcome, in my opinion.
No, I understand. Our style of music was designed to be acoustic.
Incidentally, when I say my opinion was shared by Kenny DeVerne, the great clarinet player who insisted on playing acoustically. Phil Woods, the great bebop alto player, his quintets always played acoustically. Here's a name that surprises people, Bill Evans and his trio. The Bill Evans Trio would play the largest concert halls in the United States and in Europe acoustically.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people don't understand how loud a 7-foot Steinway is with a lid open.
Right. And one more. Benny Goodman's orchestra played acoustically. He would have one microphone. He would always have a vocalist, and he would use the microphone for announcements. But even when he was playing, he would turn the microphone away or play away from it.
Yeah.
But no microphones on the saxes, trumpets, trombones, no mic on the rhythm section, and we had an acoustic guitar player. Figure that out.
Well, it was good enough for Freddie Green. I think people should be able to handle it.
Yeah, So, but see, Benny Goodman had clout when he told producers or sound man, we're going to play acoustically. Please remove all of the sound equipment and leave one microphone up in front. Oh, okay, Mr. Goodman, But unless you're Benny Goodman, you usually get a lot of flack.
Well, he was kind of a hard person to get flack too, of course.
Right.
It's kind of like telling Buddy Rich to go himself. So, which is
one probably shouldn't do that.
No, a man with a black belt and 2 sticks isn't a good idea.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's funny. I have interviewed Randy Waltz.
Oh.
And he was talking about when he was backstage the night that Buddy Rich was a half hour late at the OCC festival.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh yeah, well, Randy was backstage, and they had put on one of the college guys or the person he had traveled with him for charge before he got there, and he looked at Randy, turned around and said, "Did you do this?" And Randy said he never forgot it.
Oh man. Whoops.
Whoops is right. I guess like 5 years later, he ran into him at a coffee shop in L.A. or something, and he remembered it. Buddy remembered, said, "Oh yeah, remember that? I'm sorry about that, man." So.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is. I found it really, really interesting. But yeah, check out some of the interviews that I've done because they're going to be checking you out, and your name comes up quite often. There are a few names that come up almost every interview, and one of them is Larry, right?
Oh yeah.
And one of them is Wesley Wessenhofer comes up constantly, and our dear friend Katie Cavera.
Oh sure.
She comes up very often in these interviews.
She's so great.
Oh,
Singing and playing bass, playing banjo, playing guitar.
oh
Very talented lady. Yeah.
I tell her after every time we get a chance to play together, I'll text her like a half an hour later and just tell her how much I appreciate the fact that she never focuses on anything but making the band better. She has such
That's right.
relentless time, and
That's right.
how comfortable it makes it when you have somebody that takes charge of the time.
Right, exactly.
And she does
Exactly
it. You know?
Right. Many players seem to be play along players, and I don't know, either they're intimidated musically or they just don't want to take charge, as you put it, and it makes for like a lackluster or a weak rhythm section.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And Dan, this has been fun, man. I'm so glad you agreed to do this. I'm going to kind of start wrapping things up here. But
No, you're not.
I'm really glad. And actually, I want to give you some time here for your last thoughts and where people can access your music, whether it be CD sales or what do you have available where. This next 5 or 10 minutes is yours. Go.
Oh, that's nice of you. Well, okay, I'll start by proudly saying I finally revamped a website that was an embarrassment to me for a number of years. But with this time at home, I thought I'm finally going to do this. And it took me several days, but I did it. And I have a website now that doesn't embarrass me. And also I managed to post many old photographs, including many of the people we've been talking about: Howard Alden, Brian Shaw, Jeff Beaumont, Larry Wright. I don't think there are any of Benny in the band yet. It's still, as a website is, it's a work in progress. But anyone interested in seeing some fun old photographs or contacting me personally, there's an email address there, a link, I guess you push if you want to contact me.
What's the name of the site again?
You simply go to My Name Music, so danbarrettmusic.com. And Barrett is with 2 R's and 2 T's. Thank you very much. So danbarrettmusic.com. And if you go to the gallery page, you'll find the photographs. You'll find a bio of me, should you be interested. And you can contact me directly, and I'd love to hear from you. What else is going on? I'm supposed to go back to Spain in November. We'll see what the world situation is like. I'm supposed to go back to Europe next year, hoping I can do that, see some friends. I've been doing a lot of arranging at home for traditional bands, for big bands, for more modern groups and swing groups. So that's kept me busy. So anyone out there who needs arrangements for their small band or big band or vocalist needing lead sheets, please contact me via the email address.
Which reminds me, I want to thank you for the arrangement you did for me of Nightingale in Berkeley Square.
Oh, you're welcome. Good. Thanks for mentioning that. So I don't know what else I can tell you. I'm not too good at publicizing myself, but danbarrettmusic.com will get you to my site.
No, I think that's plenty, as long as the people can access your music, and you have a really long discography. I'll be okay when I wake up. And I'm sure a lot of that stuff is available on Amazon or CD Baby or maybe some other outlets that you actually get some feedback on, financially, that is, of course.
Yeah.
And thank you.
I'm going to go back like Uncle Wiggily or Chutes and Ladders. What's the game where you go back 2 steps?
Sorry? Oh, do you remember that game?
No.
Oh, it was a game called Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I remember here. Yeah, I don't think I ever played Sorry. Maybe. Anyway,
Candyland, one of those
steps. I'm going to go back a couple steps because when we mentioned the South Frisco Jazz Band, I don't think either of us mentioned the leader of the band, Vince Saunders.
Oh, that's true. In fact, I'm still trying to get Vince to come on.
And Vince was such a great guy, and also another one who was very generous with his time and expertise. Banjo player who also sang and led the band. And then Vince played when I led a group called the Back Bay Jazz Band.
Right.
And Brian Shaw played in that group. Also Danny Comans, whom you mentioned, Mike Baird, Paul Woltz on sousaphone, Larry Wright on piano.
Actually, I've been playing with Mike a little bit too, Mike Baird lately.
Well, all these guys, they mean so much to me. You know, they're like brothers. And I just thought I'd maybe give them, what do you call it, a shout out before we part company.
I think that's wonderful. Anybody else?
Too many to list.
Yeah, I
understand.
understand.
There, I'll go on forever. But, you know, I could mention the old New Orleans, the community of musicians from New Orleans who had settled in Los Angeles that I got to know when I was just starting out. I mentioned Bill Hadnot. He was from Kansas City. He wasn't quite as old as some of the others, but Andy Blakeney was a trumpet player.
Are you talking about like the Bachelors, that group, guys?
Even older.
Okay.
Even older.
That's hard to imagine.
Yeah. Andy Blakeney played trumpet with King Oliver in the 1920s. And in the 1940s, he's featured on many recordings with Kid Ory's band in the 1940s. And I think he did something else for a living in the 50s and 60s. But he was kind of living out his retirement and playing trumpet. And Vince used to bring him down to sub for Al Crown, the regular cornet player with the South Frisco band. So Brian Shaw and I, when we heard Andy Blakeney play something like Dippermouth Blues, we realized we were hearing a guy who had sat or stood next to Oliver and heard King Oliver play the Dippermouth Blues, you know. Andy Blakeney meant a lot to us. I got to work with Barney Bigard, the great New Orleans clarinet player who played so often with, what am I talking about? For decades with Duke Ellington. So all these guys, Joe Derensburg, he's on Armstrong's record of Hello Dolly, another New Orleans clarinet player. All these guys were so generous to Brian Shaw and me and the others who were coming up, really trying to play this music, you know. I'm glad I got to mention them before we part company.
No, I'm happy you did. And in a very strange way, that's who you are to me.
Oh, well, thank you.
You know, and I'm sincere about this. If it wasn't for you guys and people like Lawrence taking me under their wing, who knows what I'd be doing? I'd be playing trumpet in some Cuban salsa band in East LA.
Well, Dan, again, personally, you know, you're a tremendous guy, and I know you've been a great influence on your students over the years. And musically, you've earned our respect. So back at you, pal.
Excellent.
You know?
Thanks a lot, Dan. Make sure to say hi to your wife for me.
I certainly shall.
And your son. I've played a few times with your son too, and what a wonderful pianist and just a wonderful brain on that kid. You know.
Well, since I mentioned everybody else under the sun, I'd better mention Andrew Barrett, who's
Absolutely.
a terrific ragtime and novelty style piano player, and works professionally as a pianist. So, shout out to Andrew Barrett as well.
Since we're shouting out for our kids. My son's now the band director at Orange Lutheran High School in Orange.
Yes, I guess I found that out from you, or you mentioned it in passing. That really surprised me.
Which is wonderful. Of course, you knew him when he was an infant, so.
Yes, I did. That's right.
All right, Dan, you take care now.
Thanks for thinking of me for this. I really appreciate it.
How could I not? Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Trad Jazz Today. Dan shows new interviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Make sure to check out the archive of past shows, and please give us a thumbs up when you subscribe to the channel. Bye!